joining us on this
pleasure.
early morning. Early voting? Did you do your early voting
I
yet?
have not done my early
No,
voting,
okay.
but I'm going to be working at my precinct, so I'll have plenty of opportunity to vote.
You will have a very busy day ahead, that's for sure. To let you all know, too, Brad Hessel is an independent voter, unhappy with Democrats and Republicans. You say they appear to agree on and are wrong about most of the important issues. Can you expand on that for us this morning?
Well, generally, I think that the essential problem is that we've concentrated too much power in the government. And as a consequence, we have a plague of money changers in the temple, so to speak.
Okay.
Basically, practically speaking, corporatist interests, that's big corporations, big pharma, big insurance, the military-industrial complex, big energy, they're irresistibly attracted to the federal government in particular. So you get lobbyists, campaign contributions, revolving door sweetheart deals for legislators and the staff and the regulators that are supposed to be watching these guys. The ones that play ball retire and they get nice jobs afterwards. What you end up with then is the government is not exclusively, but tends to be focused on providing for the interests of these guys. So you end up with wars for oil. You end up with bailouts of banks that really should be going out of business, taxpayer money being used for that stuff. You end up with a corrupt and philosophically flawed tax system with lots of special interests built in for all these guys. That becomes an impediment to small businesses trying to compete because they can't afford lobbyists, let alone, they can barely afford accountants to keep up with the tax code, let alone, it's ridiculous to think that they would be able to afford lobbyists. So they're at a disadvantage. It's like a moat that these big corporations build to defend themselves and from competition. And so the government is essentially focused on helping those guys. And both the Republicans and the Democrats, whoever's in power, this has gone on for quite a long time now.
So you're saying there's definitely a big flaw with our status quo right now, that's for sure. Now, you back former New Mexico Governor Gary Johnson, former Republican, now Libertarian. How would he deal with these issues? How would he tackle these issues that you say are our current problem?
Well, the worst, most proximate problem is the potential for currency collapse. $50,000 is more than $50,000 is what you owe, your share of the national debt, and mine too. It's going up $3,000 a year. 43 cents out of every dollar the government spends is borrowed because we don't collect enough to cover everything that we spend money on. If this continues, it's obviously unsustainable. If it continues, eventually the folks that fund this borrowing will lose confidence in the ability of the government to pay it back. The only way to pay it back, the government can't default. Well, it could default in theory, but only on purpose. The government can essentially print money. So what will happen is the government will print more and more money to pay the debt back in dollars that are worth less and less and less. In effect, that'll destroy everyone's savings. That's already happened to some extent. The Fed, which was formed almost 100 years ago, 1913, the dollar in 1913, the dollar today is worth 5 cents of 1913 dollars. So the Fed, theoretically, its mission for most of the time it was alive was to keep the dollar stable. It hasn't done a very good job there. Since, I guess it was 1977 or thereabouts, it's had a dual mission of helping with unemployment. Well, it's not doing a very good job there either. So basically, that's the thing we have to focus on. And what Gary Johnson would do if he got into power is to stop spending money on things we can't afford with money that we don't even have. What that it means specifically, bring the troops home now from all the adventurers all overseas. Balance the budget now. Don't wait until 2040 or whatever it is that Obama and Mr. Obama and Mr. Romney are talking about. Abolish the Fed and stop the ruinous policies the Fed are following that are inflating the dollar even now. And then longer term, he would advocate replacing the income tax with a fair tax, which is essentially a consumption tax. That gets rid of all the special loopholes and favors for corporations. None of that would exist under a fair tax. Everyone simply pays an added amount to their to whatever they purchase in terms of services and goods, and there's an exemption for folks at the lower end of the income scale, so that there's some progressivity built into that as well.
All right. Well, and when we look at the polls, I mean, realistically, when it comes down to it, we're looking at Obama, President Obama, Mitt Romney. Gary Johnson, chances of him winning, we all know, is very slim. What do you have to say to our voters? Are they wasting their vote if they go for Gary Johnson?
We hear that a lot. Collectively, as a country, we've been voting for the lesser of two evils for a very long time now, and the results have gone from bad to worse. So what's the definition of insanity according to Einstein? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Okay. So by any common sense definition, a wasted vote would be one that, even if repeated indefinitely, could change nothing of substance. And that's essentially where we're at as a country. So anyway, there's only, 8 states that are in question now, and North Carolina is not one of them. Romney has a big lead here and is expected to take the state. So you could say that in 42 states in the country, everyone who votes for the loser in their state is wasting their vote, right? Because that's not going to change anything. If Governor Johnson gets just 5% nationwide, the Libertarians will qualify for millions in funding in 2016, and it can take a shot at the breaking up the two-party duopoly. The Libertarians have spent $2 million this year, and they're going to get somewhere between 2 and 5% of the vote, most likely. The Republicans and Democrats have spent billions and billions for their 45% or whatever they end up with, 46%. So we're more cost effective by about 1,000 to 1. If we could get funding for $9 million, it would make a huge difference. So there's a much greater difference between ending the two-party system and not ending the two-party system than there would be between an Obama presidency and a Romney presidency. So if you vote for Gary Johnson and contribute to that 5%, your vote has much more influence than voting for either of the lesser of two evils.
Interesting take there. Looking at Obama and Romney, of the two, which would you say is more, in your opinion, would be more towards the thinking of Gary Johnson? It might be a tough question.
Well, I would say that Romney is probably a little closer to Gary Johnson with respect to economics.
Okay.
Although Gary Johnson is clearly more conservative on fiscal matters than Romney.
Okay.
And I would say that if you look at what he says anyway, Barack Obama would probably be a little bit closer to Gary Johnson on social issues, although Gary Johnson is clearly socially more liberal than Barack Obama. So I'm not sure that answers your question directly, but...
No, that's an interesting take on that. You touched on this slightly already. What do you have to say to Republicans who tell you that they like Gary Johnson, but getting rid of Obama is the priority because he is ruining the economy?
Yeah, we get that a lot too. Okay, well, we do not see much daylight between Mr. Romney and his group and Mr. Obama. If you look at it historically, who started the bailouts? That was under the Republicans. Paul Ryan, who is renowned for his budget, he voted for our bailouts. He voted for the bailouts. He also voted for Mr. Obama's stimulus packages. He's been a supporter of the status quo all the way through. The Republicans were the ones that nominated Ben Bernanke, the guy that's running the Fed. They have a terrible policy. They have a zero interest rates forever policy that's cheating savers out of money they should be getting on their savings and trying to push people into speculative investments in the stock market or whatever have you. He has a policy of loaning out money to these banks that really shouldn't even be in business anymore. He was nominated and put in place by George Bush, and he was reconfirmed and put in for another term by Barack Obama. Now, it is true that Mr. Romney said he wants to get rid of Ben Bernanke, but his only complaint about the zero interest rate policy and and the bailouts is the quantitative easing is that he wishes they would wait until after the election so the economy would look worse now, so he'd be able to be elected, and then it'd be fine to do all that stuff. So there's really no difference.
Okay. Well, we talked about the Republicans who they say they like Gary Johnson, but they want to get rid of Obama. Let's flip it to the other side, the Democrats. What do you have to say to the Democrats who tell you they like Gary Johnson, but defeating Mr. Romney is a priority because he would make bad Supreme Court appointments? Now, that's a whole other take there. We're not talking about the economy. We're talking about Supreme Court appointments.
Right. I have to admit that I love listening to Barack Obama. When he speaks, the music is playing. It's great. I agree with a lot of what Barack Obama says. But when you look at what he does, it so rarely matches his words. Look at civil liberties, for example. It's under Barack Obama. Now, true, it was under George Bush that we passed the Patriot Act. But Barack Obama's administration encouraged and pushed through Congress and signed an extension of the Patriot Act and made it worse, made it more stringent, more restrictions. The National Defense Authorization Act, which was passed under Mr. Obama, you or I can be arrested by an executive order by Mr. Obama or someone he deputizes if they decide that we're a security risk. We can be detained and put in a jail someplace, a secret location, indefinitely. No access to a lawyer, no trial, no guarantee of a trial. Our families don't even have the right to know where we are or if we're alive, for that matter. And if they try to find out, Jill Stein, the candidate for the Green Party, tried to get into the second debate. She was arrested and put in a safe house someplace and held for 8 hours. Her staff didn't even know where she was. And finally, they found out. They went to the house and they were threatened with arrest for just being right across the street because it's a secret location and they were violating security or some fuzzy reason. I don't know exactly why, but whatever. It's really a terrible situation.
Right.
Also, if it's inconvenient to arrest us, we could be killed by executive order. You don't even have to be charged with a crime. If you're saying that the best reason to vote for Barack Obama is because you're concerned about constitutional rights, well, that's a pretty weak reason from my point of view.
Right. In all honesty, though, I mean, looking at President Obama, Mitt Romney, you're saying they both have their flaws. Gary Johnson, you say he's the right man, but really looking back at anyone who had the office of president in the last 4 years, it was a tough job for anyone.
It's a tough job, but I have to say that Gary Johnson, at this point in his career, he was governor of New Mexico for 8 years. He was elected twice as a Republican in a 2-to-1 Democratic state. While he was there, he vetoed hundreds of bills that were wasteful of taxpayer money, 750 bills more than all the other 49 other governors for those 8 years combined. Only 2 of those vetoes were sustained, so he must have had pretty good judgment, plus, of course, the fact he was reelected. He is probably more well-qualified now. Oh, yeah, employment, right. Governor Romney always talks about his 12 million jobs he's going to create, which, of course, is what Barack Obama says he's going to create, too. When Gary Johnson was governor, employment in New Mexico went up 11.6%. When Mr. Romney was governor in Massachusetts, it went up 1.6%. So his record there is better. He's probably more well qualified to be president than Mitt Romney is now, or than Barack Obama certainly was when he ran.
Interesting take. Wow. Again, Brad Hessel, independent voter, saying you're unhappy with both Republicans and the Democrats. Again, addressing some of the important issues that we talked about here. Endless military adventures, endless deficits and debt, endless bankster bailouts, unconstitutional limitations on the Bill of Rights, no solutions. So you're saying Gary Johnson, he's the man to run for Libertarian.
Your vote won't be wasted.
All right.
Have you voted yet?
I have not. I love waiting on Election Day. There's just a rush that I enjoy about having Election Day. I considered early voting, but I didn't. So
great.
I'm going to do it today, though.
Super.
Absolutely. Brad Hessel, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
We appreciate your take on this. You have a good day, sir.